Welcome again, Trekkies! In today's block, we have a bunch of episodes where characters throw caution to the wind, amongst others, as we come close to the end of counting down every live-action episode of Star Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Getting assimilated for a cause at 79 and 80, Borg Second Life, or Unimatrix Zero Parts 1 and 2. Fun fact, this episode opens with the Borg Queen holding up a modified version of Brent Spiner's head from Time Zero, trying to figure out how random Borg are able to interlink and have a reality free from the general collective while they sleep. After the opening credits, Seven finds herself in just such a place, and has a vague memory that this isn't her first time here. A place where she shares love, and Borg kids get to be kids again. Until the two strong female leads, in both the Borg Queen and Janeway, fight a proxy war within this utopia. After a lot of meddling, the Borg Queen kinda gets her way, and the simulation is shut down. But only because it becomes weaponized by giving the connected Borg the ability to have free will in the real world. While that's the general plot, the writers well utilized their time in their series arc of Janeway versus the Borg by making Kathy Borg at her own request, which is an interesting dynamic and gives her a meeting with the Borg Queen. The first Delta Flyer is lost, there's some great Borg combat, which rivals Best of Both Worlds, and this just plain is one of Trek's best cliffhangers. Looking for things to make us go at 78. Our ship is broken. We are far from home. Though the title is straight out of a Pac-led soap opera, Discovery has a rougher landing in the 32nd century. Why does this time anomaly keep dropping people in the path of random planetoids? Detmer does some fancy flying to soften the blow, but that will start her road to PTSD through the rest of the season. The intro sequence is just plain one of Trek's best overall. It literally hits hard. The episode is a scramble for survival to get the ship out of a semi-sentient killer ice before it's frozen solid. Stamets, fresh out of a medical coma, along with a wheelchair-bound Reno, almost make a full engineer that do the equivalent of Scotty in that one junction to get the ship up to bare minimum for takeoff. Meanwhile, the repairs require parts they don't have, and Tilly does her best work yet across the franchise, accompanying Saru to a shady bar/trade spot where they first learn about the future tech of programmable matter. She, along with a badass Georgiou, thwart the season's sub-boss for now. Thankfully, Burnham shows up with a ship that can help pull them out in the end, since Disco wasn't going to make it on its own. While that's a bit convenient, the ending is nice, reuniting the crew, putting them on a search for Starfleet and the mystery of the burn. The episode is action-packed and does a great job setting the pace of the 32nd century, spawning a spin-off at 77, Lower Decks. Or Lower Decks. Such a great premise, it inspired a satirical yet mostly canon series 25 years later. Rather than follow our day-to-day bridge officers, we follow ensigns bucking for promotion, some of which we know, and some that are new to the table. It creates an interesting dynamic as their bosses go through the episode trying to decide who to promote. Cedo Jaxa, returning from her academy debacle, volunteers for a mission that ends up in her losing her life, before she can even earn the red shirt she was in the running for. A ton of micro-plots come together with tragedy and promotions. I really hope at some point in the run of animated Lower Decks that we touch on the three remaining characters from this episode. Number 76 is changed by time shenanigans, Zero Mission Borg, or Regeneration. The events of First Contact left a crashed Borg sphere in Antarctica, and in the 22nd century it's rediscovered, with disastrous results. The Borg corpses still have the ability to assimilate and take off into the galaxy in an effort to join the current collective. It gives Admiral Forrest a chance to do something outside of headquarters, and then task Johnny and crew to figure out what happened, which culminates in Enterprise almost becoming a core of a new Borg ship, and Phlox to have to nearly irradiate himself to death to keep assimilation from taking hold. Our first chronological look at the Borg is well done, and a nice tie-back to First Contact that reminds us some things in Enterprise's timeline may be a little different due to the events of that movie. Waking up in a strange place with a strange face at 75, immersed in the role. Or Face of the Enemy. It only took 6 seasons, but Troy finally gets a well-written role that Marina Sirtis nails in a follow-up to the plot of unification between the Romulans and Vulcans. Deanna gets roped into a Romulan underground plot to smuggle high-level Romulan defectors to the Federation, waking up as a Romulan and told what to do or else. What makes this overall simple plot better than the average neutral zone skirmish is how Deanna goes from frustrated pawn to calling the shots by doing the Romulan thing of sniping her higher-ups, which by itself, getting one of my favorite actresses, Carolyn Seymour, to come back to playing probably my favorite depiction of a Romulan commander, gives Troy an adequate foil to keep the tension level set high as she has to improvise to get the defectors and herself onto the Enterprise, before she's taken to the real Tal Shiar. This episode is easily Marina Sirtis' best performance across the Trek franchise. Breaking the Prime Directive for a cause at 74, The Hunt for Delta Flyer, or 30 Days. In an interesting sci-fi idea, Voyager discovers a space ocean. They help the current inhabitants get to the center of this under-the-sea home they didn't build. What Tom Paris and the late great Willie Garson find is an ancient generator that holds the ocean together in space. But these people's oxygen removal is causing ecological problems that affects the generator. There's such a big analogy to how we treat our own oceans, so that they treat us better here is what earns this a top 100 entry. But Tom and Riga take this a step further by stealing the Delta Flyer and try to destroy an oxygen refinery themselves, while officials won't listen. Janeway stops them, taking his second pip, and throws him into the brig for 30 days, where the story is told in the past tense as a letter to Tom's father. There's a ton of dynamics that shift as a result of this episode, and it was nominated for an Emmy in visual effects. This one beat Star Wars to a huge CGI critter at the center of a sea by half a year. Doing something death penalty worthy at 73, sibling rivalry. Or, if memory serves, imagine Disco might have more than a couple of top episodes in Trek. This even starts by taking us all the way back to a previously on The Cage, as if this is the part 2 of the first story in Trek. And a fitting second entry it is, as Burnham takes Spock to the coordinates he's been babbling in his broken mental state. We're taken back to Talos 4, and they have the ability to put Spock's broken mind back together. We get a bunch of backstory between Burnham and Spock as kids that rivals the tale of Spock and his Sailot, as demanded by the Talosians as some kind of payment for helping Spock. Vina and Pike get a nice non-standard holocall, tying their meeting years before and their upcoming eternity together in a decade or so. The big emotions flow freely back on Discovery also as Hugh 2.0 finally confronts Ash about having to climb the Black Mushroom Mountain. He just in general wants to take his new life in a new direction and requests his own quarters. Tyler becomes even more of a punching bag when Pike blames him for sabotaging the spore drive, when really it's a control-compromised Arium. This one won an Emmy Award for makeup. There is seriously almost as much backstory about Spock in this one episode as everything we previously knew about the character combined. It does a great job of tying everything in the season arc together with a Menagerie Part 3. Finding yourself on the other side of the Prime Directive at 72? Ethical Experiments. Or Observer Effect. One of the only single episode entries to Enterprise's 4th season. And it is absolutely brilliant. It goes back to one of Trek's oldest tropes of a higher alien civilization testing humanity, but it's done on a very high level here. These particular Organian observers are testing any species that comes across a virus that's almost always fatal, just to see how they deal with it. After Hoshi and Trip die from their affliction, the crew becomes aware of the aliens that have been inhabiting them, mainly to give us, the audience, a hint as to what's really going on. It then becomes a debate about whether it's ethical to withhold a known treatment just so they can do some questionable anthropology. Particularly, we get a very Sam Beckett-esque speech out of Archer, pleading to bring his lost main characters back from the Black Mountain. This is also probably Anthony Montgomery's best performance across Enterprise. Bringing back the Organians from TOS and giving new life to one of Trek's oldest tropes earns this one a place in the top 100.
Ah, computer. That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major.
All pressure approaching critical.
Thanks, Major.
And now the conclusion.